I cheated on my husband for 6 months while he cooked romantic dinners every night to save our marriage. He accidentally poisoned me with Foxglove, held my hand all night in the hospital, saved my life, then I confessed and he divorced me in 7 days. I was in another man's bed when my husband left me a voicemail saying dinner was ready. Not a metaphor. Not something I've exaggerated with time to make myself sound worse than I was. I mean, I was literally lying in Marcus's apartment, his sheets still warm, my phone on the nightstand, and Daniel's voice coming through the speaker saying, "Hey, I made that pasta you like. Come home when you're ready. I love you." I listened to the whole message. Then I put the phone face down and stayed exactly where I was for another 40 minutes. I told myself I felt guilty. I didn't. That's the thing I have to live with. Not the affair itself, though that's heavy enough. The fact that I felt almost nothing, and kept going anyway. 6 months. Every single week of it, Daniel was cooking dinner. Not reheated leftovers. Not takeout on the couch. Real dinners, candles on the table, music playing low, fresh ingredients from the farmer's market on Saturday mornings. He texts me around 4 in the afternoon, "Picking up fish today, any requests? Or found an interesting recipe, you game?" He was trying to save our marriage and I knew it, and I sat across from him at that table, night after night, and ate the food and asked about his day and smiled at the right moments. I was so deep inside the lie that I had stopped feeling it as a lie. It had just become my life. 2 lives, running parallel, and I had convinced myself both were fine. The truth is I had no real reason to do what I did. I need to say that clearly because I spent a long time building reasons. The relationship had gone flat. We'd been together 9 years and the electricity was gone. I deserved to feel desired again. Every one of those things was a story I told myself, shaped partly by my friend Kara, who had been divorced twice and had developed this whole philosophy about women who settle. She'd pour wine on her balcony and look at me with this expression like I was already a cautionary tale and say, "You're too young to be invisible, babe." I heard that enough times that it started to sound like wisdom. It wasn't. It was her pain looking for company, and I was lonely enough to let it in. Daniel was not a bad husband. That's the part that doesn't fit the story I needed. He was the kind of man who remembered things: your coworker's kid's name, the anniversary of your mother's surgery, the specific brand of tea you liked when you had a sore throat. When we bought our house, he spent 3 weekends building raised garden beds because I'd mentioned once, casually, that I thought a garden might be nice. He coached youth soccer Saturday mornings. He called his mother every Sunday. He was steady in the way that some people just are, deeply and genuinely, and I had spent the last 2 years rewriting that steadiness as neglect because the alternative was admitting that I was the problem. Marcus was everything Daniel wasn't, which mostly meant he was unpredictable. He worked 2 floors above me, and what started as lunch conversations became something else so gradually that I was able to pretend at each step that I hadn't chosen it. That's the lie cheaters tell themselves, that it happened to them, that they were carried along by current rather than swimming deliberately towards something they wanted. I was swimming. I knew exactly what I was doing every single time. The thrill wasn't just Marcus. It was the secret. The double life. The feeling of being someone with a hidden dimension. I had been so visible and so known for so long that disappearing into something private felt like breathing for the first time in years. I told myself it would end on its own. That's the other lie. That affairs have natural expiration dates, that you can burn it out and return to your real life unchanged, that your husband will never need to know and therefore will never be upset. I told myself this every Monday morning when I drove to work. I told myself this every Friday evening when I drove home. I told myself this at our dinner table while Daniel described a problem he was solving at work and I nodded and said that sounds frustrating and thought about Marcus. The capacity for self-deception in a person who has decided they want something is genuinely bottomless. I know that now. I learned it about myself the hard way. The garden was Daniel's pride. He'd been building it for 3 years, raised beds along the back fence, herbs near the kitchen door, cutting flowers along the side path. He knew every plant in it by name, or he thought he did. That spring he bought a flat of mixed plants from a nursery sale, things he'd liked the look of in the catalog, and somewhere in that purchase was a foxglove. He didn't know what foxglove contained. He was a man who loved growing things, not a toxicologist. He planted it near the herb border because the leaves looked similar, and for weeks it just grew there, innocent-looking, waiting. He used the leaves in a sauce that Thursday evening. He'd been experimenting with green sauces that spring, using whatever was growing near the kitchen door. He made pasta with it, the kind I actually liked, and set the table with candles because it was our 9-year anniversary of the first date, a detail he had remembered and I had forgotten entirely because I had spent the afternoon with Marcus. I came home to candlelight and pasta and a husband who showed affection my cheek and said 9 years, can you believe it? And I sat down and ate every bite. 40 minutes later, something was wrong. My heart first, not pain exactly, more like it had forgotten its own rhythm, stuttering and lurching in my chest. Then dizziness so sudden it was like the floor had moved. Then nausea in waves that bent me forward over the table. Daniel was beside me before I understood I was falling. I remember his hands on my arms, his voice dropping into that register he had when he was scared but refusing to show it. Stay with me. Look at me. I've got you. He had me in the car within 4 minutes. He got me to the hospital in 11. I know the number because he told me later, like it mattered to him, like he'd been measuring it against some internal standard of fast enough. He carried me from the parking lot to the entrance. The cardiac team stabilized my heart within the hour. Foxglove contains digitalis. It disrupts the electrical signals that keep a heart beating normally. In large enough doses it kills. Daniel had used a small amount, nowhere near lethal, but enough to send my body into crisis. The doctors explained this to both of us, gently, and I watched Daniel's face while they talked. He had gone completely white. Not with guilt, he hadn't known, couldn't have known, but with the specific terror of a person who has just understood how close they came to an outcome they can't think about directly. They kept me overnight for monitoring. Daniel did not leave. He sat in the chair beside my bed through every hour of it. He spoke to nurses by name within the first hour. He asked the right questions, wrote down the answers, made sure every shift change knew my chart. When I drifted in and out of uncomfortable half-sleep, he was always there when I opened my eyes, sometimes on his phone, sometimes just sitting, once with his head tilted back and his eyes closed, not sleeping, just resting in the particular exhaustion of someone who has been holding themselves together by force of will. Around 3 in the morning I watched him for a long time while he thought I was asleep. He was leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, looking at the floor, and his face had an expression I had never seen on him in 9 years. Not grief. Not anger. Something quieter, more devastating, the expression of a person sitting with the full weight of almost losing something, turning it over and over, unable to put it down. He reached over after a while and put his hand over mine on the blanket. Carefully. Like he didn't want to wake me. Like he just needed the contact to confirm I was still there. That was when I knew I was going to tell him. Not a noble decision. Not courage. The lie had become physically impossible to hold in that room, in that light, with his hand over mine. I had watched this man carry me into an emergency room and spend the night in a plastic chair and touch my hand in the dark to make sure I was real, and the secret had become a weight I could not breathe under anymore. I told myself it was honesty. Looking back, I think it was just that I had finally hit the limit of what I could carry. The confession wasn't a gift. It was me putting down something too heavy and letting it land wherever it fell. It fell on him. Daniel. My voice came out wrong, too small, too unsteady. He looked up immediately, moved to the edge of the bed, put his hand on my face. Hey. You're okay. You're okay. And I started crying before I had formed a single word, which meant the first thing he saw was my face falling apart, which meant he already knew, on some level, that this was not about the Foxglove. I told him everything. Marcus's name. 6 months. The lies about working late, the fake conference, the dinners I'd eaten while carrying the whole hidden weight of it. The voicemail I'd listened to and ignored. The anniversary dinner I'd almost forgotten. It came out in pieces, non-linear, interrupted by crying I couldn't control. And Daniel went still. The hand that had been on my face withdrew slowly. He sat back. He turned and looked at the window, at the dark glass reflecting the pale hospital room back at us, and he was quiet for so long that I started to wonder if he'd heard me. Then he turned back. His face was composed. Completely, terrifyingly composed. Not the composure of someone suppressing rage. The composure of someone who has just had something confirmed that they will now have to carry for the rest of their life, and who has already, in the space of 30 seconds, begun the process of deciding how. His eyes were dry. His jaw was set. He looked at me the way you look at something you once loved that has just become unrecognizable. You should rest, he said. We'll talk when you're out. But his voice had changed. Not cruel. Not broken. Finished. Like a door closing in a house you've just realized you'll never live in again. I reached for his hand. He stood up and moved to the chair by the window. I lay in that hospital bed with my heart monitor beeping its steady proof that I was alive, and I understood, not abstractly, not as a future fear, but as a present and irreversible fact, what I had done. The man who had saved my life was sitting 6 feet away in the dark, and he had chosen, for the first time in 9 years, not to close the distance between us. He never would again. The suitcases were by the door when I got home. Mine. Both of them. Packed with a neatness that was somehow the cruelest detail of all, my clothes folded the way he knew I liked them, my books stacked flat to protect the spines, my toiletries in the travel bag I always used. 9 years of knowing exactly how I preferred things, applied one final time to remove me from the house as carefully as he'd once welcomed me into it. Daniel was in the kitchen. He didn't look up when I walked in. "I'd like you to stay somewhere else while I speak to a lawyer," he said. His voice was the same as it had been in the hospital. Steady. Resolved. A voice with no room left in it for negotiation. I stood in the doorway of my own home looking at my own packed bags, and I opened my mouth and closed it again because every sentence I had rehearsed in the car dissolved the moment I saw his face. "Daniel, please. I'm not doing this right now." He set down his coffee cup. Looked at me directly for the first time. "I am not able to do this right now." I called Kara from the parking lot. She answered immediately, said all the right things, told me to come over. I drove across the city with my 2 suitcases and my phone and nothing else, and I cried on her couch until I was hollow. She was kind that first night. She made tea. She sat with me. But I could feel, even through the fog of it, that her sympathy had a different texture than it would have if I'd been wronged instead of wrong. There's a specific exhaustion that comes from supporting someone who made a clear choice and is now suffering the obvious consequences, and I could feel her reaching the edges of it within days. Marcus texted me once. 5 words: "Heard you were in hospital, hope you're okay." 6 months. I had detonated my marriage over 6 months with this person, and when the wreckage arrived, he sent a 5-word text with a typo and then disappeared completely. I never heard from him again. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that wouldn't have been pathetic. I had known exactly what Marcus was the entire time. I had simply chosen, deliberately and repeatedly, not to let myself know it consciously, because knowing would have meant stopping. Daniel filed exactly 6 days after I came home from the hospital. He didn't warn me. His lawyer called my phone on a Tuesday morning while I was sitting in Kara's kitchen eating cereal I couldn't taste. The lawyer was professional and brief and gave me the name of someone I could contact. I sat there with the phone in my hand for a long time after the call ended. I had known it was coming. Knowing it was coming did not make it feel like anything other than the floor dropping away. The friends went the way friends go in these situations, quietly, through cancellations and unanswered texts and invitations that simply stopped arriving. No announcements. No dramatic confrontations. Just a gradual silence that accumulated into absence. I understood it. Daniel was the one who had been sitting in a hospital chair all night. Daniel was the one who had built the garden and cooked the dinners and remembered the anniversary and carried his wife into an emergency room. If the positions had been reversed, I would have made the same choices they did. Priya was the only one who said it directly. She texted me 3 weeks after I moved out, "I want you to know that most of us could see something was wrong for a long time. We just hoped you'd stop yourself." I read that message probably 40 times. They had all been watching. They had seen me drifting and lying and slowly dismantling something real, and they had been quietly waiting to see if I would course correct. I hadn't. I had driven it straight into the wall and then been surprised by the wreckage. I moved into a small apartment on the north side of the city. White walls. A window facing a parking structure. Nothing on the shelves because I couldn't make myself go back to the house for the rest of my things, so I just bought new things, cheaper things, things that had no history attached to them. I ate dinner alone at a table I'd ordered online, in a chair that didn't match it, in a kitchen that smelled like nothing at all. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Daniel was cooperative and reasonable throughout. He did not contest anything. He did not make it UI. He had his lawyer handle every communication, and every attempt I made to reach him personally, a letter, a voicemail, one email I spent an entire evening writing and rewriting, went unanswered. Not blocked. Just unanswered. Like my words were arriving somewhere they no longer had any meaning, like I was sending messages to an address where nobody lived anymore. I lost my job 8 months after the divorce. Restructure, they called it, genuinely bad timing, nothing targeted. But I had been barely functional for most of that year, going through the motions of work while most of my actual self was somewhere else, processing a loss I was only beginning to understand the full dimensions of. I'd been missing small deadlines, losing focus in meetings, producing work that was fine but not what I was capable of. When the cuts came, I was not the person they fought to keep. I packed my desk on a Thursday afternoon and sat in my car in the parking garage for 45 minutes before I could make myself drive home. I moved in with my mother for 3 months. I was 38 years old, sleeping in my childhood bedroom, looking at the ceiling I had looked at as a teenager, trying to reverse engineer how I had arrived back at the beginning with less than I'd started with. My mother was kind in the particular way she has always been kind, which is to say she made space and asked nothing and waited. I had taken that quality in her completely for granted my entire LT life. I noticed it now with the specific sharpness of someone who has recently lost the person who offered them the same thing. I found out about her through a mutual acquaintance at a party I probably shouldn't have attended. Daniel was seeing someone. She'd met her at a dinner. Lovely, she said. Warm. The kind of person who makes a room feel comfortable. Easy to be around. I absorbed this information standing by a table of drinks I wasn't touching, and I said something neutral and excused myself and went to the bathroom and ran the cold tap and looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. What I felt was not jealousy. Jealousy implies you still have a claim. What I felt was something more precise and more deserved, the recognition that the life I had burned down had simply continued without me. That someone was sitting at the table where Daniel used to light candles. That he had not, as some part of me had secretly and selfishly hoped, been destroyed by what I did. He had grieved and rebuilt and moved forward, the way people with intact foundations are able to do. I was still standing in the ash. The shame comes in pieces, even now. Not all at once, which would almost be easier, one devastating wave you could survive and move past. It comes in small sudden ambushes. The smell of garlic and rosemary. A pasta dish on a restaurant menu. Reading anything about accidental plant toxicity, which happens more than you'd think. And when it comes, I am back in that hospital room, watching him in the 3 a.m. dark, his elbows on his knees, his hand over mine on the blanket. The man had accidentally made me ill using herbs from his own garden, the garden he had built because I mentioned once that I thought a garden might be nice, and his response was to carry me to safety and spend the night making sure I stayed there. I repaid that with the truth, finally. 6 months too late. I used to tell myself the confession was brave. That it was the first honest thing I'd done in half a year and it should count for something. I've stopped telling myself that. The confession wasn't brave. It was just unbearable. The lie had become too heavy to hold in that specific room, in that specific light, with his specific hand over mine. I put it down because I had to, not because I chose to. And the truth, arriving 6 months too late and delivered in a hospital bed while he was still shaking from nearly losing me, wasn't a gift. It was just the final confirmation of everything I had already been. He deserved someone who would have told him the truth 6 months earlier. He deserved someone who, when the marriage went flat, would have sat across the dinner table he had set, with candles, on a Tuesday, for no reason except that he loved me, and said, "Something is wrong and I need us to fix it." Instead, he got someone who ate the dinners and smiled at the right moments and went somewhere else entirely in every way that mattered. He got 9 years of something real followed by 6 months of performance, and then a confession in a hospital bed, and then I wonder sometimes if the confession was even for him at all. I think it might have just been for me. One final thing I took from him, the right to never know. I have rebuilt some things. A new job, steadier than the last. A smaller life that fits more honestly the person I've actually become. I have learned, at significant cost, the difference between a marriage that is flat and a marriage that is broken, and that the correct response to flat is presence and honesty and effort, not escape. I have learned that steadiness is not apathy. That a man who remembers how you like your books packed is not boring. That comfort is not a trap. Kara was wrong. I was wrong to let her voice become louder than my own. But there are things I have not rebuilt and will not. The table with the candles is gone. The garden with its raised beds and its careful borders of herbs is someone else's now, or maybe just Daniel's, tended by a man who still knows every plant in it by name. The 9 years of actual history are still real, they happened, they were good, they counted, but I am no longer inside them. I forfeited my place in that story and the story continued without me, the way stories do. He never raised his voice. Not once. Not in the hospital, not when he sent me away, not through the divorce. The last thing he said to me directly was "You should rest," and he said it with more steadiness than I had shown him in 6 months of dinners. I used to wish he had been angry. Anger would have been easier to stand against. Anger would have given me something to respond to, some version of events in which his reaction was the problem and not just the consequence. But Daniel didn't give me anger. He gave me silence and lawyers and a door that closed so quietly and so completely that I am still standing on the other side of it, years later, understanding exactly what I lost. He grew something from the ground and tended it every day and it nearly killed me. And then he saved my life anyway. And the thing that actually killed us, that was all me. Every single day of it. Every dinner I sat through. Every voicemail I ignored. Every morning I chose to keep going when I could have stopped, could have told the truth, could have given him the chance to decide what he wanted to do with it. I didn't. I chose the secret instead. I chose Marcus, who sent 5 words and disappeared. I chose Kara's philosophy, which turned out to be loneliness dressed up as liberation. I chose the double life, the hidden dimension, the private thrill of being someone with a secret. I chose all of it, every day, for 6 months, while a good man lit candles and cooked dinner and tried to reach a woman who was already gone. Some choices don't announce themselves as permanent when you're making them. They feel like options, like doors you can close again if you need to. You don't realize until much later that certain doors only open one way. I know that now. I know it every morning when I make my own coffee, in my own kitchen, alone. He tried to save the marriage the only way he knew how. Every single night, for 6 months, he tried. And I let him try while I was already somewhere else, eating his food and blowing out his candles and coming to bed and lying next to him in the dark, already gone. The least he deserved was the truth while there was still time for it to matter. I gave him the truth when there was nothing left to do with it but grieve. Don't be me. Don't sit across from someone who loves you that much and decide the secret is worth more than they are. It isn't. Nothing is. And by the time you understand that, the candles will be out, the garden will belong to someone else, and the only thing left will be the specific, permanent silence of a door that has locked from the other side.